Do you struggle with comparison and competition? Do you find it hard to support women rather than, and instead you stand against them? Do you wish that you could feel like you are exactly where you're meant to be rather than feel like you aren't measuring up or other people are 10, 100 steps ahead of you in the journey? Those are some of the things that we are going to be exploring today on the Possibility Mom Live. So let me just say that I am so grateful for all of you. We are now, I don't know what number episode we are, but we are fairly well into creating consistent content. This was a dream of mine for a really long time, having some way of consistently interacting with you in this manner. I have been dreaming about starting a podcast, but even more to me, what's so fun is that it can be live. I love live content. There's just something very different about interacting with all of you live and in real time that I have always wanted to do, but it honestly was just one of those things on the shelf that I left for a long time. And I allowed myself to let comparison definitely get the better of me when it comes to starting a podcast. And to be honest, it was just sort of like, I just sort of felt like an imposter. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what are you supposed to have for like music? How does a podcast like actually work? And here's the thing I want to share with all of you today, whether you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening in your earbuds on your favorite podcast app. It's sometimes you just have to start. Because, I'll just give you a prime example. We have a wonderful person who edits the podcast. And I was like, can you please tell me, like, what's the typical way you start a podcast or end a podcast? What are the typical things that you say? I'm sure there's typical things. And I let myself agonize over that intro for forever. Let me know in the comments if you also have allowed in the past, like, one thing, like one step of the process in a big project that you have to really hold you up. And so for me, that was it. I felt like I had to get like the perfect intro and the perfect outro before we could publish the podcast into the world. And then it was like weeks and weeks. And she kept very patiently being like, hey, like, just get back to me as soon as you let me know what you want your intro and outro to be. We can hit live on all of these episodes. And finally, I just had to be like, okay, just do it. Like, just hit publish. Who cares? We'll figure out the intro and outro later. And here's the cool thing that happens from experience is you'll just figure it out. But you will figure it out a lot faster by taking action, maybe imperfectly, as opposed to humming and hawing and discerning the perfect whatever it is that you have caught up on. I mean, here's the thing. Discernment via action. I can't remember exactly who put those three words together, but I think it was somebody here. If you know, longtime listeners, if you know who it was that said this phrase, discernment via action, let me know, because I'm pretty sure this is not an original Lisa Canning thought. But you can discern something while still taking steps. I used to hate the word discernment. I mean, to be very honest with you, it still triggers me. When I hear it, when people say, I just need to discern if this is the right choice, I'm like, okay, but that doesn't mean you have to sit and like not do anything for 6 months. I do think sometimes God calls us into periods where we are supposed to be quiet and reflective. Don't get me wrong. But that doesn't mean, even when I think you're being called into a space of quiet time and reflection, I don't think it means you can't do anything. I remember, I'm going to tell you guys I'm going to peel back the curtain on my business. Some of you might be familiar with an online marketer named Stu McLaren, and he had a huge influence on my life due to the fact that he had, at the time, partnered up with Michael Hyatt to host his podcast, as well as help him run Platform University, which was a membership site. So Stu McLaren's big thing is membership sites, helping entrepreneurs take their knowledge and leverage those into membership communities. And he happened to live not terribly far from where I was based in my hometown of Toronto, Canada. And I was like, you know what? I would love to work with this man on building my business. At the time, I was still doing interior design, but I was starting to dip my toes very carefully, very timidly, very tepidly into the world of motherhood and the motherhood space. And we spent an amazing, 3 days together, or something like that. Just fun backstory. If I'm not mistaken, at the time of recording, forgive me, Stu McLaren, if I have this wrong, but if you want to book him now for a 1-day intensive, I want to say it's in the like I want to say it's something like 25,000 or 50,000. Like it's high. Like a day with him is high. Back then, it was $7,500. And I remember like that feeling enormous. But again, just to put that in context, I just think that's so interesting now that he's in the multi 10,000 figure for a 1 day with him. And back in the day, I was able to receive some intensive training with him at a different rate. So anyway, long story short, met with him, received immense amount of value. Um, but the thing that he told me at the very end of the whole thing, so we had crafted this whole like idea, this whole plan. He had taken me through all of these exercises that were very, very valuable. But at the end of the day, he told me, but listen, I don't want you to launch anything until your email list is at 30,000 emails. And I remember being like, what? Like just being like 30,000 emails. I think at the time I had 3,000 emails. And I just was like, this is an astronomical number. There is no way I'm going to hit this number. And he gave me the tactics. He told me exactly what to do in order to hit 30,000 emails. He was like, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And it was actually fairly straightforward, to be very honest with you. But the funny thing that happened, unfortunately, as a result of this statement that happened right at the end of our coaching time, was he told me, I don't want you to launch until you're at 30,000. But he didn't say, so that means don't do absolutely anything in between now and then. And that is unfortunately what I did instead. So I didn't launch a single thing. I didn't try a single thing. I became very fixated on getting to this place of 30,000 emails. I wasn't doing anything. PS. Like there was no actions in the months. There was not. I literally wasn't really doing anything to increase those numbers. It just did. There was not really anything happening. So what I wish I could have gone back in time and told myself, and what I'm telling all of you, is to just start. Like just start. And that's the thing, I 100%, Stu McLaren didn't mean don't do anything. But for some reason, I just got that so wired in my brain. Like, I can't launch until I have 30,000. I can't launch until I have 30,000. You learn so much by doing. So whatever it is that you want to pursue, whether it's business, whether it's getting your home organized, whether it be a greater discipline of your children, whether it be greater discipline of yourself through exercise or through self-care practices, you will learn so much by doing. We can't keep things in theory mode forever. So what I'd love to pose to you right here, right now, maybe we can throw this question up on the screen, is what currently in your life is only theory right now? And what would you love to move into action? So what currently in your life is only theory right now? And what would you love to move into action? Feel free to send me a comment via Instagram at Lisa Canning. Write your comment right below this video on Facebook or YouTube. And of course, if you are listening to this in podcast form, you can leave me a note in the review. Tell me what is something that you want to move from theory right now to action. And here's the thing that's so interesting about all of this is that it is as simple as that one thought followed by that one action. So, what's a thought that's going to get you to move? And then what's the action that obviously is just one incremental thing? Bringing it back to the podcast and why, I'm now, I don't know, I guess 3 or so years into the Possibility Mom platform. My book came out in 2019, July. I want to say it was July. Sometime in July. I can't remember exactly the book birthday, but sometime in early July 2019. I remember it's too bad I can't remember the actual number, but I remember I had this on a thing, like on a piece of paper up in my office where we lived in Toronto for so long. this book launch day. And so it's been several years now of doing this work, and I had wanted to do a podcast for so many of them. But again, I just became a little bit fixated with getting it perfect. I became a little bit fixated with comparing myself to everyone else before me who had hosted a podcast, and allowed that to be the clanging gong. So here's the thing. You can come up with a new thought. So in that time before, the thought I had was, other people do this so much better than me. Another thought I had was, it has to be perfect before I can launch. And so let's just do a really quick, what Brooke Castillo in the Life Coach School calls the model, and what my coaches over at Metanoia Catholic have then taken and given a very Catholic lens to. The model is something that I use in my coaching practice. It's something that I've brought into my women's school groups as well, because it's a very succinct way to look at thoughts. And so we're going to just begin with this thought that I can't do this until it's perfect. I can't do this until it's perfect. What we teach in the model is that thoughts there's a circumstance to everything in life. So the circumstance for me in this was starting a podcast. The thought I had was, I can't start until it's perfect. Our thoughts are what cause feelings, not the other way around. So thinking a thought like that for me then produced a feeling of inadequacy, self-doubt, basically like less than, and imposter syndrome. So then what actions do I take when I feel less than or I feel imposter syndrome? I go eat Doritos in my pantry. That's just the gosh darn truth. We do not currently own Doritos, but you know what I mean. Insert your, snack of choice that gives you that comfort, but then you feel bad about eating too many of afterwards. Doritos, PS, should be a sponsor. I don't even eat Doritos, but anyway, it's just like a very I think this is a thing that everyone can relate to. Running into your pantry, closing the door, and grabbing something because you feel bad. And then the result would be that I would eat Doritos and then not publish a podcast and think about it and ruminate over it forever. So here's the cool thing. If we want to come up with a new thought that will get us to that point of action, that will get us to the point of moving forward, not comparing ourselves to other people, and instead just staying in our lane and doing it anyways, we can come up with a new thought. So what I like to do, and what my coaches have taught me to do, is to reverse engineer this. You can reverse engineer from the result that you want a new thought that will bring you to this place of, I can do this. So the result that I want is a published podcast. It doesn't even have to be a popular podcast. I just want it published. What actions would I have to take in order to publish a podcast? Well, I would have to actually record the podcast. I would have to actually upload the podcast, do all the things associated with uploading it, like have a little piece of art that goes with each episode, have show notes, blah, 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 blah. Okay. How would I feel if I was doing all those things? So we're reverse engineering this, what Brooke Castillo calls the model. How would I feel in the pursuit of these actions? Well, I think I would feel pretty excited. Excited for me is a motivating emotion. I'm an easily excitable person. Excitement is just it's a fun place for me to be in, to do activities. And so what is a thought that might get you, if you can relate to this feeling of, I can't do this unless it's perfect? What is a thought that could get you to this feeling of excitement. And so I'm just going to try this on for size for myself. A thought that could get you to excitement might be, I'm so excited to learn how to publish a podcast. Something as simple as that. Or something as simple as, every step I take gets me closer to my goal. That even just like observe the thoughts, even my facial reactions, like the tone of my voice when I say those two distinctly different thoughts. The first thought was, I can't do this until it's perfect. The second thought was, I'm so excited to learn how to create a podcast. And think about how different that reaction can be. And so I want to encourage you again, here's the thing about thoughts. Thoughts can be helpful to us, and thoughts can be harmful to us. And it's our job every single day to navigate and just be aware of, is this thought I'm thinking helping me? Is it going to get me to where I want to go? Or is it actually only helping me stay stuck? And we want to not be stuck. We want to be moving and grooving and getting to that place of abundance and really where we're meant to go. And so let me know. Let's continue this conversation. I love chatting with you. I'm very grateful that this has happened. I'm very grateful. And, I gotta give some props over to my husband over there. Husband, Joshua. This was also a dream for him. So my husband and I work together in my business. My husband takes care of quite a bit of the analytics on the back end. So he's always observing what people are watching, where they're going, how they're, just what they're doing, especially here over on YouTube and on my other platforms. And he was like, I'd love to see you do a consistent show. And he was basically like begging me, like, can you just figure this out? Like, just like, what is the block you have? Can you just just do it already? And so very much because of his encouragement, but also because of his practical, like he is the one who sets up quite a bit of the back end, hits play on the video, brings on guests and all the things. So, Josh Canning, oh my gosh. Yes. As he's, if you're watching this on YouTube, he controls the little banners that show up at the bottom. And he literally just wrote the words, always listen to your husband. Josh, are you in a place where you can join me on screen? Like, is it noisy? Or can you join me?
No, it's possible.
So I have a question for you as the husband, as somebody who, was really encouraging me to do this, but was watching the resistance and what have you. What advice would you give to anybody who wants to move forward on some goals, but feel like they cannot? Can you still hear me? No, you can't hear me. Can you hear me? Oh, now you're muted. Hold on. Wait, now you're muted. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm not technically skilled at bringing myself on screen and changing around the audio and whatnot, but can you say the question one more time?
Yeah, so what observing what you saw about me, like what was happening and the resistance that I was feeling, what advice would you say to other moms out there who experience this kind of resistance, feelings of perfectionism?
Yeah, I think it's always better to start and to, like you were saying earlier, just give yourself permission to learn. I am a part of this community, this membership site, as you mentioned, called Visualize Value. It's a little bit, this is the backstage where it's a little bit louder, people, I don't know if you can tell. But it was a visual of the path a perfectionist makes versus the path of someone who iterates along the way. And the iterating one is kind of this sort of squiggly line going forward. The perfectionist was this extremely short line that doesn't really make progress. And I thought it was a good visual that, if we're waiting for it to be perfect, we may never even start. I know people who have had a great idea for a blog, and they tinker with the aspects of how the site looks forever and don't actually start writing. You can start and improve along the way. And, I would just say start. Just start. I know you. Yep.
Let's talk about this from a data perspective, because you see the data on the back end of my YouTube, for example. You're someone who is knee deep in there. And so let's talk about that from a data point of view. What benefit has just starting, so to speak, been to you who sees the data, as opposed to just waiting around and be perfect?
Um, what you might think with regards to creating content is that the most polished piece of content is going to be the one that performs the best, and that's just not the case. So interestingly, I got into analytics a little bit, understanding what videos catch people's attention, and how to how to have a good hook and how to make it engaging from the start. But we have some videos where where you've been filmed on great equipment with a good mic and all this stuff, and you think, oh, this would be amazing. But your best performing video by far is about how to fly with a baby, and it's filmed on your cell phone, an older version of your cell phone with no, particularly nice mic or anything.
Yeah.
It provides all this value to people. The content is so valuable that's the one that people see. That's the one with over 100,000 views, and people comment on it the most. So again, I think modern communication, creating content, people want stuff that's human and authentic and real, and it doesn't necessarily have to be flashy and perfectly polished. It's better to just start, and I think if you look at almost even any big YouTuber, if you go right back to the beginning, it probably looks almost nothing like what they're doing a few years in, because they iterate and they learn, and they connect with their audience more, and they understand what they like. So it's better just to start.
Why do you think moms, women, everybody, to be honest, like can struggle with iteration? Like why is iteration sometimes messy?
Iteration is necessarily messy. It's the constant art of making small improvements, right? There's this Japanese word kaizen. It's this ongoing art of very small tweaks to make things better. I think we can struggle with it because, well, I know part of the topic today is comparison. We might look to somebody for whom it looks very easy, and say, well, I can't do it that way, and so therefore I won't start. We can probably all think of lots of examples of this in our lives. For me, one of those was public speaking. I can't envision myself giving the perfect speech, so therefore I'd rather not take invitations to speak. The alternative is to get in the messiness of trying it, and you sent me to a public speaking intensive to learn this, and it meant I had to hear what was good and what was bad about my presentations at that point, and it enabled a lot of progress to happen. So I think we struggle with it because we're wounded, we're afraid of failure, but by not even starting, we lose a lot of the fun that's involved. I have some people that are kind of photographing this. So I'm going to ask you guys to grab my computer charger. Can you in the bedroom? And
oh my goodness. For those of you watching on YouTube, you are getting a little sneak peek into the life of the Canning family. For those of you listening on podcast format, you are hearing all the noise. Oh my word. Well, thanks, Honey, so much for hopping on real quick. I appreciate your insight.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Here's the thing. The faster we can make friends with failure, the faster competition, comparison, all the things actually become somewhat of a moot point. And so if this is something that you struggle with, I'm very excited to continue this conversation today with my very special guest, my friend, my colleague, my mentor, someone who has taught me tons of new skills. And I just, let's forget. Well, let's just get into it. Welcome to the Possibility Mom Live, the beautiful January Donovan. Hello! Look at you.
Hello, my
friend. Oh my gosh, I love it. Look at what you're wearing. It's so pretty.
Oh, thank you. It's date night.
Oh.
That's my incentive for a Friday fun outfit is date night. Thank you for having me here. You're so good for you.
So, January, for anyone who might not know who you are and what you do, can you just introduce yourself very quickly?
I am a teacher. That is what I do. I'm a teacher in the women's school. I am a software strategist, which means that really the mission for me is how can we raise women's self-worth collaboratively for the world and reset the expectations. So I am the founder of the women's school, where we really train women on practical skill set to really reimagine her whole entire life. That's really it's every I would say every part of women's arena. And we train strategists, which is a personal guide for women to grow into a life of wholeness. I am a mom of 8. I am a student. I fail all day long. That is who I am. I learn from it. So I think that I'm I'm that woman who needs it the most, and that's really what the women's school is about.
So fun. I mean, many people know my story here, especially over on YouTube, and we'll link it in the cards as well. But I came into the women's school at a time of great challenge for me, and I became a strategist. Back then, I was $50,000 in immense debt, and then since then have gone on to take 100 women, over 100 women, through this program as a strategist, and it has greatly blessed my life. And I am very grateful for the tool of the Art of Being a Woman masterclass and for the work that you and your husband and your family have put into this program. So, what I want to talk about today with you is comparison and competition,
Mhm.
because it is a I believe it's one of the single biggest things that hold women back.
Yeah.
And you might be thinking, I'd be curious. I think there might be some people who think, oh no, I don't actually deal with comparison or competition. But I actually think the majority of women do,
Mhm.
because it can come up so easily. You see something, you might not, I think there might be some women who don't resonate with the word competition. They might not feel like they're competing.
Mhm.
But I think comparison can come up thousands of times in a day. You could look at a magazine picture that shows up, in an advertisement in your mail and think, oh man, my bathroom doesn't look anything like that. And it can go so many different ways. Your next immediate thought could be, I deserve a bathroom that looks like that. What can I do today to make my bathroom look like that? But then you can also go, I wish I had the skills. I don't know how I can do it. My bathroom's always going to look like this. Da, 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 da. So, January, do you agree? Do you think comparison and competition is a huge challenge today in women? And what is it that you're observing in the work that you do?
Okay, so I think, Lisa, you hit the nail on the head. It's probably one of the biggest prisons that women live in. And it's a prison because it's a very vulnerable state. It's not that we raise our hand and say, yep, I'm anxious today. Oh, yep, I'm pretty stressed. We don't say, yep, I've compared myself to you today. There is a vulnerability around it that is silent. So it becomes a silent prison when it is in the silence and in the dark, it grows even deeper.
Mm.
Okay. So to me, that's number one. And then number two, our culture promotes it. So it is a norm. So a woman, if we think that it's a norm, we don't even know that we are in pain and suffering because of it. Or we can't hold our culture accountable and say that's actually an injustice to women. You can't go in People magazine and say that's 40% she looks better in that dress than 50% and have language that's tolerable and say, yep, just not perfect enough. The norm itself makes it so acceptable that women don't realize the pain that they're in. So I think that's number two, is that there's a unified prison around it because of what the cultural expectation. And number three, it comes in different format, like you said. It's not that women actually say, I'm comparing myself, competing myself. I think part of it is that there's no language for the struggle. So, self-loathing is a form of comparison. Why would we self-loathe? Because we probably see what we lack. Self-talk could be a form of comparison and competition, because what's the metric of that self-negative talk?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens in a very visible world is that our mind actually, it's so powerful that it snaps a picture. That our senses, our visual sense, are 40 to 60% more powerful than our hearing or our touch. And so a snap of an image, if we don't have the tools, could bring us into an ocean of comparison before we're even aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
The image of a house that looks like this. Our subconscious mind is already calculating what my house isn't, but it's happening in our subconscious brain, in the backdrop, kind of like kind of like a sound, and we're unaware of it because it's a norm. And B, we have no language for it. I would dare say that this has been the reason why we don't have deep connection,
Mm.
why we don't actually dare to dream and walk into failure. This has caused a lot of mental, emotional stress, because the feeling of lack and not having enough is puts our amygdala into worry state. So really, we have to have an honest conversation if we want freedom for ourselves and our children, but really for the world. But the kicker, I think, Lisa, which nobody's talking about, I believe it's also contagious.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
And it's subconscious contagious because when we're actually talking to our children, be like, oh, that outfit is awful, right? That criticism, awful in comparison to who? And get who listens to it? Our children. But it's all happening. We're so unaware of it. Awareness is always the first prison we break ourselves free from. So what happened is it becomes a generational comparison and competition crisis.
Mm-hmm.
We are feeling all the layers of suffering and pain around it, but we're unaware of what the disease is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, it's why I love how we get right into the Art of Being a Woman masterclass in lesson 6. So early on in the 22 lesson module, we get right into how your self-worth was neurologically wired. And I'll tell you, lesson 6 for me is a doozy. You know, when I take my groups through it, everybody's excited in the beginning. You know, for anyone who's not familiar or who hasn't taken the master class, the very first, 1 to 5 lessons are very much on dreaming. To be very honest, it's fairly light and bright. It's very like, you deserve this, that you are capable of this. You know, what's the desire of your heart? It's all good for you to think about. And then we get to lesson 6. It's like, now let's examine why you have not potentially moved forward. And that is what I think is an essential thing, that again, unless you've been to therapy or unless you've been to counseling or unless I don't know, had like whatever, an experience, a culture where you were asked these really specific questions about your childhood, you may not be aware of these standards that you have in your head that are completely under the surface. And then what's so beautiful is when you ask these questions, when you do this work, you no longer have to feel trapped or feel like any of these things have to continue to be a narrative. They can just be something that, you use this phrase all the time, that they can be a compass, they can be a guide. So for anyone who might be listening to this and they sort of are hearing, yeah, okay, I definitely have these standards in my head that now inform why I say, oh, that's awful, or I can't believe she did that, or whatever it is that perhaps makes you feel less than and get that amygdala into hyperdrive. What advice would you have for her?
I would say that there's a way out of that prison. I would say that don't believe the lie that this is who we are and that we are designed to be in this cage. We were not created to be trapped. We were designed for freedom. We were given a God given freedom. So What does that look like? It means that we have to learn new way of thinking and new way of being. We need new skill set. We can't solve the same crisis being the same kind of woman. That's called insanity. You can't solve the same problem with the same level of skill set. So we have to acquire a new way of thinking and a new way of being and a new skill set. So I would say that there's hope. And if you're willing to work, you can eradicate comparison and competition completely. You can back it up neurologically, scientifically. I am evidence of that. That was the first thing that my mentor actually got rid of. Um, it's always, you can manage it, but there is a point where you're free of it. And when you say you manage it, you always want to be vigilant against anything that you want to make sure that you don't, you don't want to get too laxed, but you can absolutely live and taste of freedom like you have not before if you free yourself from comparing and competing, where you now see every woman as a source of wisdom, as an opportunity for collaboration, and you can celebrate her from within. There's a freedom that is so profound when you're able to reach that level of mastery and eliminate that comparison and competition. And I would say that it is also contagious, that we actually could create a ripple effect when you reset the expectation of women by knowing actually how to communicate boundaries of, oh, that's not what we do, or that's not how we do it. That you create a ripple impact in your children and your friends, and we can free the world from it. So my invitation to you is you don't have to be trapped.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually your choice.
Mm-hmm.
You're not responsible for how you've been trained or lack thereof, but you are responsible for how you're going to design it moving forward. And you are also obligated to work backwards from asking yourself, who am I really choosing to be? And what is the legacy that I want to leave behind? Is it a woman who's secretly comparing herself and feeling insecure and inadequate? Or is it a woman who is able to freely walk in every single room without feeling inferior and insecure?
Mm.
You can walk in every room with somebody who has 3 PhDs, I don't know, wealth, and you will walk in that room and not even give it one thought that you are less or more than the other. But you see every woman as valuable. That is not only what you deserve, but it's what actually fulfills the human heart. And it's very possible. You just have to make a choice and make a decision to say, I am going to decide to be free of it, whatever it takes.
Oh, so good. So, it's interesting you say it's what we deserve, but I also want to add that it's what that other woman deserves. You
Yes,
know, I was in interior design before in Toronto for many years, and it's a very image conscious industry. Like, you are dressed. Like, if you're going to go into public in these stores where lamps cost $50,000, like, no,
what? A lamp?
you know what I mean? I'm exaggerating a little
Oh,
bit,
I
but
was
you know
like,
what I mean.
maybe.
Like, I remember at one of these stores because I wanted to feel like I fit in and I wanted to feel like, I was with it. I spent on it. It was a set for TV. I spent $425. I'm not even kidding, on a paperweight. I'm not even kidding.
Paperweight as in like
Like a sculpture.
paperweight.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was $425. Anyway, side note. So just to give you a sense, like, it was very, you didn't wear the same outfit twice. You were very conscious about what brands you were wearing. And, if you bought something at Target, it had to be like the designer's line at Target. And you talked about it and it was cool because it was the designer's line at Target. Anyway, but I just remember it was so exhausting. And I would look at these other women that I was comparing myself to, and I would think in my head, oh my gosh, like, she has it so much better than I do. She is so much further ahead of me in the journey. blah, 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 blah. But why I'm bringing this up, that it's actually a gift to yourself to break free, but it's also a gift to that person, because we're not really honoring their dignity when we're kind of making this story or this narrative about what they have, what they don't have. What's interesting in the work that I do now, I've remained friends with a lot of these people that I was envious of or
Mm,
felt challenged by. And they come to me now and they tell me all these stories of like, I wish you and I had had this conversation,
mm,
5 years ago when you were feeling so burdened, because I was feeling burdened too. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm still feeling burdened, like all the things. So not only is it a gift for us and necessary for us, but I think it's a gift for other people, that we don't create these stories that, number one, aren't true and that really aren't honoring their dignity. Okay. Well, listen, I got to ask you, because your time is precious and I want to get in my very personal questions. Whenever I get you on my shows, I'm like, how personal can I
yeah,
go?
personnel.
So I want to know what this looks like for you
Mhm,
every single day. So I think I know the answer to this question. Like,
mhm,
I'm going to assume that you feel free of comparison and competition. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yes,
You feel fairly free.
I think that with most things in my life, whether it's humility, whether it's generosity, I just always want to be vigilant. But I police myself to make sure I have a knee-jerk reaction to compliment and celebrate women. So,
Okay. So
but I
wait,
think that was a skill.
let's talk about that. So
Yes.
knee jerk reaction. So what does that look like for January Donovan presently? Like, you see someone and you might feel this sort of like human reaction. And then what happens? Like, give us an example of,
Yeah. Let me think. What would that be? So for let's just say I find like an outfit I like in a
okay.
woman.
Okay.
I'll be like, oh, that's a great outfit. That looks great on her. Do I fit in that? I mean, so I don't even, I guess that's, I'm trying to actually reverse engineer what I do. Or if I go to somebody's house, I'm like, that's a nice outfit, that's a nice couch or something. And I'd be like, oh, that's such a nice couch. Where did you get it? That's so great. So I think I go right into either harvesting from it or just celebrating it. So I'm trying to think of what I do honestly, because I feel like I don't even allow myself to go there mentally.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So if there's something else, let's just say there's a situation where I feel like, you know, I'm trying to think like, would I, if I go to a situation, I feel like, okay, that's a threat. I don't know. I don't go there. I guess in my mind, I don't, I just all day try to say, what can I compliment? How can I compliment women?
yeah,
So I think that's probably my knee-jerk reaction, which is why I'm having trouble trying to figure out what I do. Um, because I think that when I have ill thought about a woman, I police myself. So I don't, so maybe that's it. I don't even want to have an ill thought so that I don't even go to a point where I'm criticizing her in my mind.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, but I think this is an important question, but I think that you can't be free from comparison and competition unless you understand your self-worth.
yeah.
Because what happens is that you can look at the woman and you can see, okay, I'm gonna compliment them and I can, want to celebrate that. But if you don't know your own value, it doesn't have, you can't recognize the other woman's value.
Hmm.
So the metric that you hold for yourself is the same metric you hold for other women. It's not a different metric. So that's why so many women who criticize other women is really because they criticize themselves. So that's why, in the women's school, you can't just fix one thing. That's why it has to be the whole woman, because you're fixing this and it impacts this and impacts the self-worth. And that's why you lose your sense of comparing yourself, because you realize how uniquely valuable you are, which means you really can't compare yourself to other women's contribution, because you understand that you have 100 billion neurons and you have 1 trillion neural connections that is irreplaceable and unique to you alone, and that means that you're have a unique contribution. You can't compare. So when you understand your worth from a very physiological, neurological, that this time in history, there's no basis for comparison. You can look at other women and say, gosh, I can learn from her. Like, I need to work out more, or, you know, she looks great and I need to get on my workout. So it becomes sort of women just become a walking wisdom.
Wow.
Now, and yeah, so I think if that answers your question on a personal level, I think that I'm constantly policing myself. Honestly, Lisa, like every conversation I walk out, I'm studying how I could have done that better, maybe.
That's so interesting. That is so interesting. Yeah, no, my observation of you, I tell this all the time in the groups that I lead that I have this unique perspective into, January Donovan because I see you in real life. So I can see the principles that you teach in the women's school applied in a social perspective, in a parenting perspective, in your marriage. It's like I feel like I have like the inside, the crack of
It's
it.
real. You see the failures in between, and it's
I mean,
real. Like, I don't hide from it.
there's two things I want to highlight that I think are interesting. You are number one, so naturally complimentary. Like I see you do this when you introduce me to other people. You will pay me a compliment when you're introducing me. I see you do this to new people you meet. Like I see you doing this all the time, and I think it is exactly what we're saying here. You have developed the skill to replace any kind of comparison, competition, ill will thought, any thought with a how can I celebrate her? How can I honor her? So I find that very interesting. The other thing I want to highlight that I find very interesting and intriguing with you that I personally struggle with is you are very patient, or my observation is, so again, correct me if I'm wrong, but again, my observation of you is that you are very patient with your own journey. Would you say that's true?
Uh, I haven't. Yeah, I would say it was so funny. I was having a conversation with my husband. I was like, I think I've worked on my patience. I mean, I would say that I don't kick myself for failing, if that's patience. I would say that I harvest a lot of things from my failure and don't maybe attach my worth to it. Maybe that's a way of patience. I'm just trying to figure out because there's so many different ways to be patient. I'm like, I could work on my patience with my children. So, I could yeah, maybe it's patience or that. I think it goes back to worth.
Hmm.
Where I don't have to have it all figured out, but my worth is not attached to my results.
Yep. Yeah.
So I'm okay with that's we go back to like the name brand. If we know our worth, then we don't have to buy the name brand. We can still buy the name brand as long as we don't see it attach it to our worth. There's a freedom in it. And I would say that those are two things that my mentor actually, my first strategist, now that I look back on it, really I remember the training, Lisa, of making sure I have a knee-jerk reaction of thinking well of women. Like literally, that was like months of I remember her just saying, what's a writing it out. I probably still have my homework. I had to write down what I admired in women as sort of a knee-jerk reaction. So it's just a skill. I think everybody is it's not I don't think there's anything special about me learning that. I think it was just a skill somebody taught me.
Yeah.
I think patience is also a skill. What I mean by that is that the more we understand our value as a human person, the more we are actually detached to the external, which means external results. Many things have failed. Is it possible to kind of like, oh, I should have? Yeah, I think you have moments, but it's also learning then the skill to manage those times where you feel like you're a failure, so you don't kind of go into the spiral of self-loathing, and that I think is a form of impatience with ourselves. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, again, I just anytime I get that, I'm like, how can I pull back the curtain? Because it's just,
Yeah.
I think you are obviously a product of what you're teaching, and so the more that we can hear your own personal stories, the more we can, gain value and insight. And so I appreciate it so much. I appreciate your vulnerability. Abigail here says, "Thank you, January and Lisa, for your guidance and mentorship. I am truly a new whole woman. So massive transformation I had with both of you. Thank you, Abigail." There's lots of women's school related people watching here today live on YouTube. So welcome everybody. Hi everybody. So listen, if someone wants to experience this freedom, get to this place of knee jerk reaction where they do not even go to a place of ill will, we have a 5-day challenge that I am so excited to talk about and share with all of you. So, January, together, you and I, which is going to be so much fun. We are going to be leading people through a 5-day challenge on how to finally find freedom from comparison. What can people expect in this 5-day challenge?
Expect to be commissioned. What I mean by that is that we should be ambassadors of this freedom. Expect to work. We can't expect to get rid of it unless we're willing to work for it. Expect to get uncomfortable and vulnerable, but expect to actually have glass shattered on what is possible for your dreams, for your contribution if you got rid of this. Expect to dream in a way that perhaps you haven't given yourself permission. Expect to have deeper connection from this awareness. I would say that expect a new level of depth in understanding what it means to be a woman.
How does that sound, everybody? Does anybody want that? Anybody? Does anybody want that? So I'm going to put in the chat right below this video how you can join us in this free 5-day challenge. You're going to get access to me. You're going to get access to January. We are going to have all kinds of fun. You're also going to get access to a whole bunch of women who are right where you are, seeking wholeness, seeking freedom from comparison and competition. And January, thank you for, leading the charge on this and for your vulnerability and for sharing your life and your stories and all of these years. That's the cool thing about what you've created in this masterclass experience is it truly is years and years and years and years of amassed information from all different resources, secular, non-secular, science, sociological, all kinds of resources into one really convenient spot. And so we are so excited to welcome people into this free 5-day challenge on how to finally rid yourself of comparison and competition. I'm so excited to host it with you. So everybody come on over. It is happening June. Forgive me. I never memorize dates. The sanguine in me memorizes very little. June 28th to July 2nd, live with me in January every single day of that week. We're going to have all kinds of fun. January, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. This is an area that I find it's like boot camp for me because I, unlike January, I am impatient with my progress. I'm a woman of big goals, and so it's very knee jerk for me to use that expression. It can be very knee jerk for me to go to that place of shoot, like they're 10,000 steps ahead of me in the journey. Shoot, like is this even worth it if it's not going to work? That's a phrase in my head, that I've been actively really working with my mindset coach, Erin Ingold from Metanoia Catholic, like using the work that I've learned, obviously the resources in the women's school, to just select different thoughts. I mean, at the very, I was talking about thoughts earlier in the show today, just at the basic level, there's such a different thought to think. So instead of thinking, oh my gosh, like I love that outfit, but I could never pull it off. It can be as simple as swapping that thought for, oh my gosh, she looks amazing. I know it sounds so simple and maybe too basic, but that's it. That's like the heart of it is, can we think a different thought that instead sort of stands against somebody else and goes into self-loathing in ourselves, instead celebrates where we all are. If you're like me and you struggle with patience in your journey, can we be detached from the outcome? I find this one of the most interesting and essential skills to learn, being detached from the outcome. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with Josh, with sort of like metrics and going for something anyway. When we were talking about that YouTube video, the one that is our most like high performing, most watched, most commented video, I remember thinking while I was filming it, like on my old iPhone 6, if I'm not mistaken, like it was like so clunky. It was like thick. It was it was a much older phone. I remember thinking like, oh man, I see some of these like vloggers with like GoPros and this is going to look so amateur. Like I remember thinking those thoughts at the time. And again, it's one of our most highest performance, videos. Um and so my point in sharing all of this is that if you struggle like me with patience on the journey, the more we can just get into the habit and film the video on your old iPhone 6 anyways, the more we can get into the habit of being detached with the outcome, the more we can get in the habit of not allowing the voices of, like instant criticism or instant self-loathing or instant blame. The more we can just kind of tell those thoughts, like just be aware. A dear friend of mine just shared this with me. We can go into judge mode or we can go into observation mode. Think about that for a second. How interesting is that? We can go into judge mode, which usually, like you can imagine, will produce thoughts and feelings and actions that are kind of no fun. But if we are in observation mode, even when we might have a thought that's more negative or more judgmental, we can just be like, oh, that's an interesting thought. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. I will take your opinion under advisement. You know what I mean? So, if you enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to leave me a comment, let me know, write a review on Apple iTunes or wherever you love to listen to podcasts. It is, like I said at the top of this episode, it is a joy to be doing this with you. And I am so grateful that I finally got off the procrastination and perfectionism train and instead just decided to do it anyway. And so the encouragement I want to give you today is, what is something in theory that you could put into action by just changing one thought and then taking one action? Okay, friends, we'll see you next week.